For this episode, I will be interviewing fashion photographer Rebecca Slaughter. Rebecca moved from Denver to Los Angeles last year, right before the pandemic, and found a positive momentum that had been culminating in her life all of a sudden come to a screeching halt. But her story of overcoming the odds doesn't start there. Her whole life, she has overcome the odds. She has wonderful things to tell us about how she personally stays in her alignment, stays in her purpose, how she stays in her truth. She also reminded me that we have to appreciate the small victories, especially on the days where it feels like everything goes wrong. When things go wrong, we have to stay right. Follow her journey on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and of course, RebeccaSlaughter.com. As always, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Having to deal with obsessive compulsive disorder, and trying to unpack from a young age, like things about myself that, I felt defective. I felt like something was not normal, and you realize that we all have this experience of like, what is normal? How do we define normal? And it's mixed with all the vulnerabilities that we still, as much as we've been able to progress as a society, man, we still are kind of uptight about these things. In fact, we're more self-conscious now more than ever, and that's why it's going to be, I really want to hear a lot from you, because I feel like you have such a unique position. A lot of people would assume, being in the fashion industry and stuff, I mean, you're dealing with people that have like the most confidence. They're the gold standard that everyone's trying to obtain to. They have no problems. It's perfect. And everyone sees, what experience I've been able to talk to some people. It'd be probably surprised to hear a lot of the struggles. And so even though it's not my world, I'm really interested in hearing about it and hearing about your story. And I just wanted to kind of spill that out just so you're comfortable talking about things. Enough about me though, man. Dude, tell me about your story and about how you ended up in California. And, I know I've caught some of your story, but for the people that are listening and watching, tell them who Rebecca Slaughter is.
Totally. I mean, it's definitely a mouthful, and I'll make it as quick as possible to where it makes more sense. We can definitely get to the deeper part of the conversation. I started doing photography 10 years ago. It definitely just fell in my lap in some capacity. I feel like photography chose me and not the other way around. I had an extremely traumatic upbringing. My family, I always tell people I could write a book about like every single crime that's out there, and every immediate family member of mine has committed it or been involved in it in some capacity. And I think that not only these dramatic like lifestyles of crime or mental illness, I grew up around that and just like really never felt, not that I didn't belong, I was very loved, but I definitely felt different. And the older I got, the more I was seeking that out and tried to figure out who I was in the middle of all this chaos, because I'm not personally a chaotic person. And so in being surrounded by that so much, it pushed me to this other, like to my own deep end, where like I cared a lot about mental health and research a lot of psychology, and even went to school or was attempted to go to college to get a degree in it. But like I said, photography just kept choosing me over and over again, and I kept choosing it back. And so here we are 10 years later. I have shot everything under the sun. I have niched down to working with women. I love photographing women. I love shooting small businesses, and lingerie and swimwear are probably my top tier favorite things to do. If I could get paid to just do that, I would. I'm definitely not there yet, but I moved to California. I moved to LA a year ago, or a year and a half ago, to pursue that more heavily. Not only because there's more of a market for it here for me, but also the checks are bigger, no matter which way you slice it and dice it, and compared to Colorado market. I absolutely love Colorado. I honor it. I'm so grateful for it. It's full of amazing people and opportunities. And I go back there very frequently to still work with all of my old and some new clients. And so I'm sitting here today, just evolved as I've ever been, and more excited about my business journey and mental health journey than I have ever been before. 2020 was very difficult on me, as I know it was on everyone else, in such a unique way. And I think my big takeaway that I've been able to turn into a positive is getting more comfortable with publicly speaking about my mental health. Now, in person, like we were talking about earlier, I have no problem talking to a stranger about it, or friends or whatever over dinner. It's a very common conversation about my mental health, or whoever I'm around. And talking about it publicly, like on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, is so new. But I feel, oh my gosh, just so called to sharing some of the things that go through my mind, or some of my experiences, and combining that with being this beautiful woman that I am, and as I'm aging and growing, and also this photographer and business person that I am. So combining all those is really amazing. It's also difficult because I'm creating my own lane, essentially, which is exciting and full of pressure and difficult all at once. And another thing that's kind of really made it very clear in 2020 is to take care of myself first. So talking about mental health, like understanding this constant ebb and flow, all these things that I have going on, making sure that I'm taken care of before anything else. And that looks like so many different things. And then talking about that, and then shooting, and then like coming back and like taking care of myself. Like I'm an introverted extrovert, I say. So I'm so grateful for the last 10 years. There's so many stories to tell, so many pictures to show it. And I'm just now here to spread a message and just keep working.
That's awesome, man. Dude, we are kindred spirits. As a heterosexual man, I enjoy what you do. Okay. I'm not trying to sound creepy, but let's just say, man, as someone who's my whole life, I've been very attentive to detail. Like when I do music, it's like heaven and hell, because it's like, I see all the little detail, and it's just kind of just like, I either immerse myself for 20 hours and don't sleep, and I get whatever, or I'm just like, I just can't, but, I noticed detail in lots of different things, and your attention to detail, like the way that you shoot people, not shoot people, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Shooting people is common terminology in my house and my family members. It took a while to get past that. Like, wait, what did you just say? But honestly, that just like,
drive-by photography. It's what I noticed with certain, like, because I've done some shooting with music and stuff, and it's weird, like being with a photographer. I had to learn, like, at first you have so much doubt, like, okay, do I look good? There's so much self-consciousness, and there's so much of those.
You're ultimately all of a sudden aware of how you look.
Yes.
Every way.
On a heightened level. Yeah. And the person you're with, really, like, there's such an importance to developing that comfort where they breathe energy into things. And just from my whole life of being able to see pictures of people and whatever, I noticed that the people that you shoot, they're very happy. Like there is it's just not like an outer beauty that you bring out of them. You bring something inner. And that's what, to me, like, beauty is like a lamp. It's like, it can look very, very, you can have the greatest looking lamp in the world, but if it doesn't turn on, if it's not the light, it's kind of like, it's lacking its purpose. And for me, like,
wow, I love that analogy.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. It really is something that I feel like you bring that out of people. And that's very, very difficult to do. I mean, there are professional, there are professional shots I've seen of people that, like, I'm like, wow, this person does not look attractive at all. Like,
or they're a really attractive person and you're like, this is a really bad angle.
Yeah.
Honestly, it doesn't need to necessarily be like a really attractive person. Everyone, and when I say everyone, I mean it. Everyone has beautiful angles. Oftentimes they're either shot wrong, or they're afraid to shoot, or they don't even know how to work their own phone. And that's fine. I don't expect everybody to know, but let me tell you, everybody has a good angle, and like, you get them with the right photographer and they'll see it. So it is a total letdown when you see someone and you're like, wow, she's really pretty, or he's this, or whatever. Even like someone that's not a model, and you just look at them and you're like, that's just a bad photo, and you just don't know.
You're obviously a very attractive person yourself, so you have the experience of like, okay, this is what works for me, and then you interpret that, man, into how and it just makes sense that like that you would work with models and stuff, because I feel like, well, you've already kind of perfected it, and not only that, you have the inner quality. I know we're kind of sidetracked, but I wanted to say that like it's kind of like an important detail that I feel like it's just kind of a cool thing to notice, and I just thought it was kind of neat to bring up.
I mean, honestly, it's that very thing that separates my work from anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not everybody knows what you just said, but I know it, and I have to constantly remind myself of those truths. And
absolutely,
I appreciate you seeing me for what I am.
Yeah, dude. Well, what's amazing too is that I really get from you, like, it's hard to get like your identity and not like exaggerate it or like overextend. Like, a lot of times people know who they are, but they go too far with it. Like, this is who I am, and it's like, okay, man, like if that's really who you are, just rest in that. And the fact that when you say positive things about yourself, like I know it's like it's very matter of fact. Like it's very just like, it's that's just the way it is, And
as a matter of fact,
yeah,
I am. Yes, no, and I do appreciate the compliments, but it's just I read something recently, and it said something about when someone compliments you, you should obviously appreciate it, but like it shouldn't go much farther than that. Just as much if someone said something negative about you, honestly, those two things should equally impact you. Yeah. And I read that and I was like, that's so odd. Like, why wouldn't you just take a compliment really seriously and like the negative, kind of push it out to the wayside? But to be honest, I've spent so much time alone over the last year. I see that and I'm like, wow. And like, to be honest, somebody really close to me gave me a really big compliment the other day. And I was like, I appreciate that. But like, the fact that I put in all this effort and work to like look in the mirror every morning and look at my face in the mirror and look at my naked body in the mirror, whatever that looks like, and tell myself I'm enough. That compliment was appreciated, but when you're already doing the work, it's just like, that, but like, and it's difficult. It's so difficult.
Absolutely, man. And like, I know there was something that I realized, because when you're doing music, it's kind of a different, it's a real different thing when you're trying to produce something that's inside you, and it's like this slow, for lack of a better word, constipation, that you're like trying to grab it out, and you're able to write a song, and you're able to produce it, and so you know the song better than anyone. So why, like, when someone gives you a compliment, like, when people started to give me compliments for certain things, man, I had a hard time. Like, it felt weird. Like, it didn't land like in the right area. Like, I was like, like, it was like, well, thanks, man. But what I began to realize is that it's like, you can't receive a compliment that you haven't already given yourself,
Yes. And there was definitely a long period in my life where I gained a ton of success in my career, but I just wasn't doing the most work I could do on the inside. I was doing a lot, but like, I remember I felt the same way and it wouldn't land. And I'd always hear it. And I was like, oh, like I don't deserve this or something. And it wasn't like out of self-hatred. It was just out of like, now that I'm not in that place in my life, I know exactly why, because just like you said, like I hadn't given myself or hadn't fully believed what I had given myself, or I hadn't given it myself.
Yeah. People don't really understand like the dynamic between pride and humility. There's this passage in the Old Testament. I think it's in Exodus or something like that, where it says, and Moses was the meekest man on the face of the earth. Moses actually wrote that. Like, so it's like, it's kind of like it's a great example of like what real humility is like, it's like, I am the greatest person right now. It's kind of funny, but to drive it home in a spiritual angle, there really is quite like, it's not that to accept the role that you have wherever you are and to affect the people around you, you can't just surprise yourself, with who you are. Like you do the groundwork, you kind of find this sense, this center of your energy that becomes kind of the central organizing principle of center of yourself, and you give of that. And it's not like, oh, where'd this come from? It's there's a stability there. And I know for me, like, for the longest time, it's like I was so caught up in doubting that center. And for me, once you begin to really embrace that place where you realize that the places of vulnerability and the doubt that you have, that sense of defect kind of in yourself, once you realize that everybody has that, you then realize, wait, so this is how I can relate to people. If I actually can see them as someone that has the same sensibility or same vulnerability, same areas, I don't have to pretend that I have something to offer. Like I'm just a mutual human being with with someone that I can notice their individual struggles, come to terms with things. And that alone, just to be present with people, to be able to engage them on a level that is just authentic, because you've rested in your own authenticity. I feel like that alone, if everyone had that, I mean, the world would be such a better place, And I know the first part of my podcast, of my telling my story, is going to be centered around the sense of defect, because I feel like it's a very immediate place to start. Because like I said, I think everyone has some degree of like doubt in themselves.
Everyone has a lot of it, 100%. Yep. I think it's a gift to recognize it, like you obviously have. And I think the ultimate gift is not only recognizing that, but stepping into your power of like who you actually are.
Yeah.
And I think that what isn't so inspiring to other people when they look at me, whether they know me in real life or follow me on the internet, they're inspired by the fact that I embrace who I am.
Yeah.
It's not really much more complicated than that, because everybody wishes they could. Yeah. And it's really difficult, and everything gets in the way. Our brains are developed to tell us that we're doing something wrong. Yeah. And I honestly, the bottom line is people are just inspired by me being genuinely myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here, man. Like, I feel like it's weird. I'm a music teacher, on the side and stuff. And like, some of my best students that I've ever had are people that I was able to connect to on a very human level. And it wasn't that I was teaching them music per se. I was teaching them like the thing behind the music. It's like the life behind the music. It's like how you do, you kind of bring the life behind the pictures, it's like that inner dynamic, that sort of awareness. There was something that I posted recently about, it's the inner game behind the game of life is life itself. So it's kind of like, I like these little like proverbial complex ways of saying something that everybody knows, but it's hard to articulate.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
They're eye-opening statements. Well, you should make a TikTok. Do you have a TikTok?
I made like one TikTok video, and I was just like, okay, man, I'm getting too old to do this, but here's the deal. At this point, like, I'm so confident, and I've been able to, feels like no matter almost who I'm able to really talk to, they enjoy some of the things that I have to say. And I feel like I should not deny myself any possible audience, so yeah, man.
Called to have an audience, then why do you not go to one of the easiest places to get an audience?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
You said so many things just now that I'm like, gosh, this would do so well on TikTok, and not just in the capacity of like, you would do good on TikTok. Like, people would really hear what you have to say.
Oh, thank you, man. Really, thank you.
Comes down to.
Thank you so much, man. Really, that's kind of one thing that I've really had to deal with, and this is part of my the blessing and the curse when you deal with something with OCD. It works its way into your personality in positive ways and negative ways. But for me, like, I've never been that, like, growing up with almost any topic, especially like I don't know, with anything, I always had like this little voice telling me like, okay, but there's something behind that. Like, what's really behind it? Like, what's, trying to dig deep into something and not letting go until I find it, and part of myself is that I, for the longest time, just kept doubting myself and kept growing though. And until one day I realized that, like, you never kill this doubt. It's always there. It's always available. And as long as you aren't willing to like realize that you're just another human being, and it's, to me, you can only bring to the world the things that you can kind of bring, the things that are unique to you, when you stop setting up walls, and you stop making excuses for separating yourself from people. And and when you deal with existential doubt or shame and stuff, and you feel defective, it's something that isolates you, and being able to go through it with what I've gone through and understand myself, and really have to, like, that's the thing, is that it's weird when I discovered with OCD, like, in order to really overcome it, I had to like plug it into itself. I had to become obsessive and compulsive about overcoming obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's almost like when you realize that there's this weird thing that all of a sudden you feel like a lock. You feel something. Okay, whoa! I feel stability there. And
the thing is, like, to talk about like the things like the doubt and all that stuff that we're all working through, and like feeling defective.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, I feel like for me especially, I went to therapy one time, or one time. I've been going for like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked about something, and I was like, cool, so like we got through that, can we like move on to another thing? And she was like, oh honey, she was like, each time that your life changes in significant ways, move, children, marriage, relationship, breakup, whatever, you're going to have to readdress this thing in a new way. So like healthy coping mechanisms. I just want to address that, like, yeah, we got to figure out doubt, we got to figure out intrusive thoughts, we got to figure out all this shit. But that's for now, because in 5 years from now, life's going to look different, and you're still going to, those things don't disappear. They stay around. You just learn how to manage them. And that management is something that you can never stop doing. It's a muscle that you continually have to work on. It's like regular muscles in the gym, and managing those types of behaviors that interrupt our everyday lives, which we all have. It's a rest of your life kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, so let me ask you this. Like, I know in my own recovery and my own therapy, when I, I've gone to several people, and when, kind of like gathered stuff from each thing, or each person I went to, kind of helped me along the way. I know especially there was a couple at my church that really helped me get into like, trauma recovery, understanding, addressing the things that you should have had, or and the things that you experience. So there's two kinds of trauma, whatever. And it was really it was really great. But for me, whenever I began to go back into my life, my early years, it was weird. It was like, I think too often we have nostalgia over our entire childhood. And so we don't exactly want to look at some of the negative things. And when we are like able to effectively address them, it like your memory all of a sudden becomes like hyper active. Like, I remember things now from like child. It's like my whole life has become more high definition as far as like seeing things. And but it's been a process. I just want to kind of like, it's, going back into my own early years, there's such like energy that I now feel plugged into. I feel like when we come into this world, we're kind of, we're much less egocentric. It's like, I give this example how, like, we stumble and fall trying to walk, but we're praised because we're trying to be a person. We're trying, and then we go to school, and when we fail, it's held against us. It's like complete opposite psychology of how we develop as a person. It's so centered around something else. The metric is outside, outside yourself, rather than kind of channeling who you are and being someone. Really embracing some of that rich fabric of my own experience of life, and bringing it now into the present. It's been a significant thing in my life. It's something that I really, really want to explore in my art. I'm interested to know about your kind of formative years and some of the things that you feel are you've had to overcome, and if you kind of have a similar experience, or if not,
Yeah. So funny listening to you. I feel like I actually have the opposite. When you said you've gotten older and you were able to plug into like the joy of childhood and all these things, or you remember you have nostalgia for childhood. That's what you. I don't have that. When I look at my childhood, it's all very dark. And I think that that's a picture that I painted as I was going to my teen years to help me get out of this, like I guess at the beginning of the interview, like this cycle of crime and mental illness. And so when I look back, it's actually not very pretty. And that's honestly like, oh, there's a lot of therapy that I would like to continue to go through because that's not the case. And so I have the opposite problem of you where I have to look back and remember it wasn't all ugly by any means. And I was really loved. I had a lot of fun. I became who I am today because of that.
Unconditional love, like we come into the world and we don't ask for existence, we come into this and it's just, life's just given to us. And that fundamental, carrying that sort of unconscious principle and working through things like, I guess in order for, in my perceptions and stuff, like in order to really be joyful and to really carry that light that we have, it goes back to a sort of unconditional love. And so when we come into this world, we have a certain light, and then we have all this kind of negative stuff that we experience, and we have to sort of salvage whatever light that we have to be the person that we want to be in the world. What are some of the earliest memories that you have?
Yeah, I think that some of those are really scary, like a lot of my early memories are of my parents fighting and kind of like family members fighting with each other, with strangers, and not really knowing where I belonged, like physically, like where do I go, and scared. That's probably half of it. And then the other half of my early memories are being just like knowing that feeling of being really loved. My grandma is who raised me, and I think she's who taught me unconditional love. She says that you bond she says you bond with a baby when they're still a baby, like when they're still wrapped up and swaddled. And that's what create a bond. And I definitely know that we did that. And she was like, no, by no means was she like my best friend growing up. She was definitely a disciplinary. That woman taught me unconditional love. And for that, I'm grateful because it's something that I always want to give to other people. So one of my favorite memories of my grandma is, I don't know if it was snowing a lot in Colorado, but it definitely was in winter. And I think it was like the school wasn't closed or anything, but it was snowy. And I remember waking up in the morning and I was like, Grandma, I really don't want to go to school today. And I had told her that like a million times before. And she would be like, it doesn't matter. You're going to school. And it must have been snowing actually, because they couldn't work. My grandparents couldn't work that day because their jobs were outside. And so I remember she looked at me and she was like, I don't want to take you to school. And I was like, okay. So the rest of the day, we played like hooky together. And she said that. And we like sat in my room and played Atari, like the little like thing that you toggle around. Ate pizza in bed and just like watched movies all day. And I just loved that, like, it was so about me in that moment. Like, it wasn't about grandma. It was about like our relationship. And she knew in that moment, and I knew in that moment, no matter how I was in elementary, I knew in that moment that would last forever, and that she chose our relationship over the world that day. And that's me unconditional.
Wow. Wow, man. That's
really, try not to cry because it's so beautiful.
I'm getting, I actually have a similar story. Like, I know I really resonate with that. I'm a middle child. I have a younger brother who lives in Oregon, and my older brother who I live with, actually. This is our place. And and so, but it's weird. My older brother was like, like the star athlete, that like, he was one of the best like pitchers in Alabama. And my younger brother, dude, he was like a prodigy. Like at 2, my dad made him like little like golf clubs, and he was like hitting just like straight shots and like the driving range. I mean, he could have been a golf pro. Like he really, like, everything he touched, like just he could do everything, and
you as a middle child were just like,
see, I mean, like, I had heart. Like, it was weird. Me and my little brother would be very competitive because I was older and stronger, and so I could compete with him. But it was funny. Like, my older brother would always be like, man, I have to side with the younger brother. So no matter what we did, if we played football, my brother would probably try a little harder for Brian, my younger brother, and anyways, it always felt like, like there's this middle child syndrome that's sort of like, because you're in the midst of the family, but you're not like the focal point. My theory is that it kind of drives you outward, in inward. And so like, so for me, like I was probably about 10 or 11. And one day I remember my dad came home and just out of nowhere was just like, want to go to the arcade, you want to, whatever. And it was, my first instinct was like, well, let me get one of my brothers, or, whatever. And he was like, no, I just want to take you, and like, and dude, I immediately got really nervous. And maybe it was just a time in my life, I don't know, but for some reason it was just a time where like I really needed that sort of attention. We do this whole arcade thing, and we go to like one of the snack bars. He's like, what do you want? And like, at this time, I'm kind of coming out of my skin a little bit. And so I point to one thing, and he's like, okay. And he gets it. I point to something else before not like pointing to like everything. And so we sit out in the car and just eat junk food. And it was just like, it was weird. It was one of those things that whenever I was in my own recovery and I was so like knotted up inside, and I'd lost such essence of like, I guess, of unconditional love. Like that memory, like was one that I revisited. So when you were speaking, like when you have that memory that's so like, it's a sharp point, like there's something like really that's being specifically communicated to you by a loved one. There's nothing in this world that a person can give to someone else that I think is more significant, and it's
in time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quality and quantity. I really know what you mean, though, man. When someone is able to take the time out to really bond with you, it changes you, man. Like you feel like if you can bond with this one person, maybe I can bond with somebody else. And before you know it, you have this. It's weird. I used to notice when my mom would effortlessly talk to someone. I'd like, do you know them?
Right.
Like and I'd be like, you immediately, it's like there's this familiar like essence that you have with people, and to cultivate that is it's a real gift. I'm all over the place now, but yeah, man, it's where with I have ADD and OCD, so it's just like this.
It's a beautiful cocktail.
It's a multiverse of like distraction. It's just like, being in such contrast. I think it's actually a very it's a blessing in disguise to have that within also a dark environment, because there's such polarization. There's almost like, okay, I don't want to be that, even though there's the opportunity to succumb to that, the fact that that's made conscious, that the dark side of life isn't hid from you. I think honestly, probably growing up for me, I was probably I probably was a little bit different, and that's why whenever I started experiencing a lot of things, I kind of didn't know exactly how to handle it, because I'm trying to be the perfect little Christian kid, and you're having like thoughts that you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to hell. It's especially when puberty hits, you're just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And so coming to terms with the human condition, and that's kind of that's been kind of my criticism, I think, of like of American religions. It's not what you believe, it's how you believe. It's how you actually the essence of who you are, I think, should hold the substance of what you actually believe. It's not just a theory. It's how you were raised, and having this sort of center. When did you learn to begin to nourish this part of you, when you knew, okay, this is, even if you weren't to be conscious of it, you probably began to feel like this, a center to yourself that had value and that was unconditionally loved. But when did you begin to really, kind of face or adopt the responsibility necessary to preserve it and to relocate and to take risk and to really value yourself the way you are now? What was the path from experiencing that, addressing anxiety and things, and feeling, and having enough sense of purpose that you knew, okay, I'm creative or something better than this?
I love that question because it's literally so broad, but like I about people, like I would totally get it and get how to answer it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of hard to like even articulate what that looks like, you know? I think that just like photography, this idea of like me being that type of person that can hold space for people or love on people unconditionally, it really fell in my lap too, because from what I can remember when life was kind of a little dark when I was growing up from what my awareness of it is. And the worst years for me were probably between 15 and 20 were treacherous and not my fault. And it was just all these outside circumstances that were constantly weighing down on me. And I was always like, it was never like, why me? But it was more like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And that what the fuck attitude turned it into like, okay, well, I can do something about it, versus like, why me attitude kind of just like put you in a corner to just ask questions. And I wasn't in the place to ask questions. I was only in the place to do things. So long story short, just to answer your question, I was homeless. My parents abandoned me. And that's really what I'm referring to, because at that moment, you know, your brain's not fully developed even at 17, 16.
Yeah.
And to just look, I just looked around and I was like, well, I guess I'm doing it on my own. Like, what the fuck? It wasn't really, why would you leave me? It was just like, it literally doesn't make sense at all that you would leave. No. So I'm just going to have to move forward accordingly because I'm a good person. I didn't ask any questions. I just moved. And then I got a little bit older and I started working with my ex. I was his assistant and we ended up being partners in like marketing, coffee, whiskey bar, barbershop, clothing brand, photography, you name it. We did it all together. And in owning this coffee whiskey bar, all this life started happening inside of it, where, you know, obviously people were showing up for drinks and to work or to party or whatever it may be. And I took a notice to how people were looking at me. And I was like, wow, I'm stepping into this role of leadership and it's so natural. It's happening naturally. And I really honor it. Just like I honored my photography when it made no sense. I was just like, wow, this is being given to me, and this talent and how it's all just coming together. I'm just going to honor it, just like I did my photography. And so I kind of just started honoring this leadership role. And so we'd have parties, events. We had events all the time. And it's the only way to really establish a storefront is to have an event. And we did tons. Coffee events, whiskey events. Was amazing. Like the time of my life. You name it, we did it. And I hosted it and I was there. And I just noticed that like, especially women were taking a liking to me, whether it was like, how did you learn to do your makeup? How did you learn to dress like that? Well, how did you get to this point in your life? And I was always like, what the fuck? You know, like I'm so young, like how are these women that are older than me asking me how to? And it just kept evolving. And then I was shooting. So at that point in my life, I was already shooting models and modeling myself. I noticed that I was shooting every time I shot. I was like, gosh, every girl I'm working with, I could just literally be her best friend. And that's my personality type. And every girl I shot with was like, oh, when you shot with so-and-so, it looks so cool. Like she looks like an awesome person. And I was like, yeah, she is an awesome person. So weird that you guys haven't met. And then I would be hanging out with my girlfriends from school or college or whatever. And they would be like, how's that model actually? And I'd always be like, she's great. Like, what do you mean? And they were always so judgmental because again, this is the beginning of my career and they really didn't know what was going on. And then I would go to church. I went to church probably every Sunday for like 5 years. My ex's dad was the pastor of the church as well. So I was heavily involved in everything I was doing. And I would hang out with girls at church or his family that went to church with us. You know, it's a very common thing to go get breakfast or lunch, whatever, after church. Then I'd have my friends from church being like, what's it like shooting with these girls? And so everybody was basically asking questions and also making assumptions at the same time. And then simultaneously at the bar, I was getting put on this pedestal and I was like, this is so fucking weird. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to host a girls' night. And so what started as this idea of just like putting people at a table together, talking about meaningful shit, evolved into 3 to 4 years of me and publicly inviting people over to my house. And I would cook for everybody until it got to like 30 people. It ended up being like 51 time. And I had to just like stop cooking. It was like, I had everybody bring food themselves, but that was kind of just to like make people comfortable. And then everybody kind of be like sitting in my living room. And they would just be like, And I'm like, awesome. Well, thank you guys for so much for coming. I know I didn't tell you what was about because that's not what this is about. This is about something that's very courageous. And I honor each of one of you that are in here.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, the reason why I brought everybody in the room was, and I say this, we're not here to drink and talk shit about our boyfriends. We are here to dig deep and be available to each other and be there for each other in ways that the community thrives in. And in the Bible, it talks a lot about we're born into communities, we thrive in communities.
Yeah.
I think the idea of like being alone and an individual by yourself, I think that's all very isolating, and I don't think it's healthy. And the things, the change and the beauty and all these things that I've seen in front of my eyes because a group of people got together and decided to is exponential, and it's exponential beyond what an individual can do. So all these reasons I create this girls' night, and like I said, it went on for so long. As I'm doing this, I'm more and more developing this role as a leader in the community and as a thought leader and a mentor. And I'm also developing as an entrepreneur on the side. Everybody's like, why do you do this? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it's set on my heart to do this every month. And so I'm going to do it till it doesn't make sense. And that's exactly what I did. And so I don't do it now because I'm not in Colorado, and I wish I could, but I think truly just embracing, taking the time to notice what's going on, embracing what your heart tells you or you feel called to embrace, actually doing that and following through is really how I ended up where I am. Because when you follow the path that's like laid in front of you and not resist the things that hurt you, because you will be hurt, things don't fall in your lap, but they sure do fall into place.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to get into some of these details with some people because I feel like you want someone to be present to really kind of feel kind of with the psyche of that person, and kind of feel like, okay, and follow. And it's like, from what I really gather, like there's been such growth that you felt that you just assumed, and that you took responsibility, probably not even consciously. It was more or less you have a certain vision or a certain goal that you went after, and the consequence of that is having confidence. It's like, I think too often people will try to aim for things directly, like how to be confident. And it's kind of like, a lot of times if you aim for something, being focused on that goal makes you confident. It's like the fact that you're conscious of something else, you don't go to confidence, you go through confidence. There's a lot of things. Yeah.
And it keeps that what you just said is what keeps you humble no matter where you're at in your life. And that's exactly what I ran into, where I was like constantly like, whoa, these people look up to me, these girls look up to me. Or if I was around teenagers ever, I was like, gosh, you cannot take advantage of the role that you have in your life. And that's what keeps you humble, is like, anytime someone would speak to me in some capacity or look up to me, I was like, wow. And I didn't carry weight of like, oh, being a leader is so complicated or hard. I was just like, you should honor the fact that person looks up to you, and don't take advantage of them, and don't take advantage of their conversation, and open their heart the way you've learned to open yours. And community breeds community, like attracts like, energy pushes more energy. And that's just like how the world goes around.
Yeah. What's an instance or a time where you've experienced doubt, or you've felt defective, and you were able to kind of be resilient, and in the process, have something to point to, like, okay, man, I'm stronger than I think. You have any along the path, there's been certain areas of resistance or things that you look back on, you're like, that really sucked, but you know what, look, going forward, whenever I go and whenever I have a negative experience, I don't go negative with it. Like when things go wrong, too often people go wrong too. It's like when things go, when it's like when things go wrong, that's especially the time that we have to stay right. Because if we go wrong, then everything just goes to hell. Like we are the person that's supposed to salvage whatever happens, in our life, and assuming that responsibility. It's funny when you look at the word responsibility. I think a lot of times we think of the word and we're like, oh God, it just sounds so like adult. It sounds so conservative or something. And it's like, think about it. It's the ability to respond. That's all responsibility is. It's so like when something happens, being conscious of your ability to respond to the situation, that's responsibility. having the over analytical mind, too often there's so with people and with like just language, there's so much stuff that I try to pull out, and I envy some people that don't have like a simple, or that have more of a simple mind, because they I don't know, it's life's a little easier probably, but like I don't know, man, like I've had to just embrace what I have,
Your gift. First of all, understand that it's your gift.
Mhm.
Understand it's not going to change. You
Mhm.
have to cope with it in ways that are conducive for you in your future. And that's beautiful. Honestly, I have a very over analytical mind. I've been
Yeah.
told by multiple therapists that I over intellectualize, and
Yeah.
I'm too self-aware. And so I completely understand how you
Mhm.
feel. What I'm working on this year is like this simple statement. Things are only complicated. Things only get complicated if you so choose to complicate them. It's
Yeah.
only weird if you make it weird.
Yeah.
It's complicated if you make it complicated. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not that deep. And that's really what I'm focusing on. Is like
Yeah.
sometimes it's not that deep. Because for me,
Absolutely.
I could make everything deep. I could turn everything into a
Yes.
fucking poem.
Yeah.
I could talk
Yeah.
about one thing for an hour. Like, I
Absolutely.
completely
Dude,
understand.
absolutely. I mean, think of it like this. You take like, I don't know, let's say like this lighter. Okay, I got candles here. It helps my face look a little less Dracula.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, well, I'm
Liking.
working on like a setup here, man. Like it's kind of chaotic, but like, yeah, I had to put some lights up and stuff. So yeah, I don't like
Great.
blood does not exist in my body. I have to get a little more. So anyway, so like, man, like I said, take this lighter, okay? Let's say you break it open, okay? There's gas or whatever the hell it is, you take under a microscope, you see all these cells, okay? You cut the cell in half, or and you see all this stuff in it. You to the point where there's atoms, and you cut an atom in half. Of course, you're gonna get a nuclear explosion, but so much energy is within the atoms of everything.
Yes.
I mean, to think that like it's like infinity. It's pretty much like, it's almost like when you think about infinity, like I know this is getting deep, but the whole point of this is to actually be undeep. Okay, so like check this out. So if there's like infinity like outward, well then there's also like infinity inward, kind of. Okay, so it kind of counteracts itself. It's to the point where it's just things just are.
Yes.
It's kind of like when people talk about how God is infinite, and well, something that's infinite is infinitely big and infinitely small. The point where its largest, its largesse is kind of irrelevant, and our experience is like that. Like the only reason why I like to unpack things is because there's interesting things to like make conscious. But like our natural experience is very simple. When we come into this world, we experience reality like in high definition. It's like without our prejudices, we just experience things. There's a rich fabric to just being.
Yep.
And that's essentially like what we're trying to, in some ways, I like to think that in overcoming our certain obstacles, we are getting back to restoring a sort of childhood high definition, but we are able to both we're able to hold it with the psychology of the adult. So we can both be the child and the adult, and we can be, we can be silly, we can have fun, we can be joyful, and also be able to be serious. And that's why, like, the seriousness of all these topics and these things, it all comes back down to just experience, just being. It's just like, dude, when I don't have anything to do, dude, I just like to sit and just be. Man, writing, I like to just write whatever, just explore like my own reality. That's my favorite thing to do. Like and I notice like when I do that, there's this energy that I have to do everything else. It's like if I try to do everything outward to try to obtain some sort of value, it just drains me. But it's when I spiritually get things in tune, all of a sudden it's like I want to do things. I don't have to do them. I want to, And where was I going with that? I have no idea.
It's not.
Building off victories, like what are some of the things that like you had, or any moments, that obstacles along the way that you don't have to get too deep, but again, it's like I feel like when we share our experiences, sometimes Even though there's the beginning and where we're at right now, the in between, you know, there's things that make the story very interesting, where you didn't know that you'd be where you're at now, and yet you are where you are now. It's like, what are some victories that you've had along the way that that really were kind of challenging?
Yeah, 2020 was definitely challenging. We moved to LA in December of 2019. So we had 3.5 months before we were faced with probably one of the most traumatic things we faced in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And when I say we, I mean me, my boyfriend, and my roommate. We all came from Colorado together. And in March, it was just like sheer panic, like what the actual fuck. And it was, at first it was like, what the fuck, because it was just so weird. And like, we didn't really know like the reality of what 2020 was going to look like. And I would say probably in June through probably September of 2020, I just lost all grips of reality of who I was, what I was doing, where I was at, because what I was saying to myself was, why me? And instead of what the fuck. And so when I said why me to myself over and over again every single day, like, and honestly, I am not at all like bashing that. It's asking yourself why me. I had nothing to do every day. I would wake up in this abyss of like, can't go outside. I'm getting migraines because I don't get in the sun enough. Walking my dogs 5 miles a day. Boyfriend's losing job, all family and friends, everybody's affected, the world, like I just didn't know anything. And then my main question was, why on earth do I decide to move to LA of all the years I wanted to move here this time? Why did I move now? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. You know, I'm still trying to figure it out. So here we are months later, and we moved into a smaller place, save more money. Roommate ended up moving back home, and we figured it out. And you know, jobs are back in order and everything like that. I had a friend visiting me a couple months ago, and we were talking real deep, and he was just like, what are you most afraid of in life? And I was like, myself. And he was like, why do you ask that? Or why did you say that? And I was like, because I think it's a really scary thing to want to not be here because you don't know what the fuck is going on. And it's a lot less scary to just be taken out of life because it's no longer your time. To know that you're in control of that, and then also like just have no clear idea of what and who you are after 9 years of doing it. I'm pretty scared of myself. And he was like, for sure, I totally get it. And I was like, ever since that moment, I was like, all right, this is true. Like, I am very afraid of myself. How do I put myself in a position to where I'm not the victim to my own story? And choose that over and over again, but instead choose being the victor and the hero of my own story. I slowly but surely fought like fucking hell to get out of bed and make it make sense. And it didn't make sense sometimes. You know, sometimes it was like we were saying, it was like sometimes it was really existential and deep. Other times it was just like actually as simple as getting up and trying to follow some sort of routine, some type of small win. Over a period of time, you do that over and over and over again. Eventually, things will not fall in your lap, but they kind of fall in your lap. So choose yourself, and you so choose to be on the right path again. Sitting here today on the same couch that I couldn't get off of for who knows weeks at a time. I mean, I would just lose track of time. And that's what happens when you're you know, like fighting illness, mental illness, is you just like spiral. And it's so dark because it's just, there's no one else there with you. And that isolation is ugly. So sitting here today in the same spot that like nearly like killed me is so powerful, because I've been through hell and back already. And that's another thing why I was like, why me? Like, I've already been through fucking hell. Why do I need any more of this? Like, clearly, God, we know I can handle it. Like, why do I need more? And why is not the question to ask? It's not really the question to ask, because there's really never going to be an answer. And so now I feel like I'm sitting in my power. I feel like I'm sitting here as like the strongest woman I've ever been, the best version of me I've ever been. All those things that I said back in our call earlier, like none of them really will go away. I just learned how to cope better. Those intrusive thoughts, the depressive thoughts, anxious, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, all of that, I now have systems in place to not necessarily avoid, but to cope with myself when I start spiraling, which is inevitable. It's daily practices. Hopefully it doesn't happen on the daily. Sometimes it does. And sometimes I do lose control still, but I can hold space for her. You know what, we're grown up and sometimes we're going to feel some type of way about something. We just need to get through it anyway. I had just come from a chapter in my life where I was such a workhorse and valued my worth on work. It was really hard to hold space for myself to be depressed. And it's sometimes just really hard to hold space for myself just to be me.
Yeah.
So that was extremely difficult. And I have found so much power by stepping into myself and figuring out who I am past 2020. I want to say I don't recognize myself, but I don't even want to take that away from me because I do. I knew it was over there.
Yeah. Man, it sounds like you are such in a place of growth.
Yes.
Where it's, I feel like when we talk about having an identity, when people talk about having an identity and stuff, they think of something static, and they think of like this ideal of who they want to be, and it's like they're constantly comparing themselves, which is good to have ideals and stuff. But what I've come to learn about for myself is that your identity isn't like, your identity is like
evolving,
more of a transmission. The way a transmission works in a vehicle, which I'm not a car guy, I had to ask my brother how a transmission works. The way a transmission works in a vehicle, according to what I understand, is that in order to switch from different gears, the vehicle has the transmission has to be suspended. So like you go from a place of being in a certain gear, and then you have to suspend, the transmission to go to the other gear. And I was just like, that's amazing. I was like, I think our identity isn't a static. It's like our identity is a way of accessing the different gears. It's the ability for us to stand outside the different modes of being, and it's actually the thing that can suspend itself from all the different maybe like minor versions of ourselves that maybe are maybe slightly egoic or of the ego, where too often we can make that our identity, and they're merely kind of like articles of clothing or like a mode that we get in. If I'm teaching, I get into the teacher mode. But it's still driven by that ability to suspend myself from what I'm doing. I have no idea where I was going with that. I just thought it was kind of an interesting idea.
Oh, I love that. I love when people speak in analogies because it's so helpful for me because it stays in my head. Or if I ever like hear the word or see a car or see a car transition, I'll think back to that. So I think that's really great. And I think honestly, if you do make TikToks, that's definitely a really great way to communicate with people, your message. Because analogies are super unique to you and they're biblical, but not everybody needs to know that. But I think really beautiful way of communicating. So don't need to go anywhere. I think that it's I love listening to you respond because it's your way of processing everything that I just said. And basically what you're telling me is like I held space for me to be different versions of myself to ultimately get back to this like main thing that I've always been. It's just like we're always evolving, that there has to be room for that. And if there's not, you're gonna feel stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're talking about with photography, I kind of fell in your lap. And I know for me, like it's very interesting because I think this sort of thing, like communicating and getting into all these topics, like this is where I feel like the most alive as a person. Like I feel like this is what I want to do for, as a living. Like this is because I feel like I've done so much work on myself. And I also realize that there's so much work left to do in ways of understanding people and ways, I feel like I can foster a positive influence, and it's weird though, because I always wanted.
You're right. Everything you just said is not a feeling. It's a knowing. Please embrace that you know that.
Thank you. Absolutely, man. And I'm
just so excited to be here because I really hope that you really do keep pursuing this because it is, you have a gift and you have multiple gifts and you've learned how to combine them in a way that ultimately you can also monetize, which is to me the definition of happiness, like monetize the very gifts that you have in a way that are meaningful.
James Taylor once said that like he is himself for a living. And I thought that's a beautiful way. That's the dream right there, is that to be yourself for a living, to where you're just not different kind of modes of yourself. It's all integrated into like, and
understanding that self is multidimensional.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, man. And you're always growing with that. A lot of times I think we think of growth as something that is kind of a burden. We kind of think of like, oh God, I gotta like, when is it going to end? When can I just like rest? And the thing is that like growth isn't something that you have to do. It's something that you get to do. Man? Like it's an exploration of this crazy thing called reality. It's a thing that it expands. It's universe is in constant expansion. I feel like us as human beings, we should kind of simultaneously with the universe be expanding ourselves. Now, of course, we have to like also contract, and rest. But I think the nature of life itself is expansive, and our growth, I think if it's coming from a place of trauma, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's a burden, it drains you. But when it's coming from a place of real purpose and meaning, and from a place of knowing, like you're saying, it's like there's such richness to life. You're like, I don't want to stop growing. It's like when I go and I love like there's things there's books I'm working on, and things that, man, when I get into some of these ideas that I have, it's like I go into myself and I'm exploring this like wilderness, and there's these things that are just so it's like I go there for a few hours, and when I come out of it, I have like a section of writing that I'm trying to, while I'm going there, I'm navigating this place, and it's like I look at the world differently, and it's like there's such a joy to going into this place, and like I'm just not exploring myself in a comfortable way. I'm exploring things that are kind of uncomfortable, saying, okay, no, let's go behind that. Like, what do I really mean by this? Do I really believe this? And that's something that I feel like I've had to a person who's really helped me with that is Carl Jung, the psychologist. I'm a huge Carl Jung fan. Like he's I have such a similarity. When I read his autobiography, it really resonated with me, because I feel like in the modern era, we have our understanding of spirituality is very lacking. And I come from I'm in Alabama. I'm in a place where I have a lot of positive memories, but also have, I think, a lot of, like I said, cultural religion can be something that's just, it's very superficial, and also feeling the change in the culture, and being kind of like caught in the middle of it all. Mm-hmm. And for me, like when I explore a lot of these things, I try not to be reactionary. I try to say, okay, there's obviously something that a group of people or there's an idea that I may be tempted to exaggerate and be oversimplistic, but I'm going to intentionally choose to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to actually pursue. I'm going to try to defend this idea, even though I maybe don't believe it. I'm going to try to make a good case for it, because I trust my ability that my reality isn't going to fall apart if I try to think differently. It's like I'm not so tied to my ideas to where I challenge myself. I just, it's to me, growing is being able to say, okay, I'm gonna think about this. There's some things that obviously I think are destructive ways of thinking or whatever, but to me, there is a sort of synthesis of healthy psychology and good ideas, and
having resistance towards new ideas or new ways of thinking should speak volumes on the fact that you should probably reconsider the way you were originally thinking.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of been the problem with a lot of American spirituality and American religion, is that there's been such this, it's more of a grip on something that is freely given to you. And so like the more that you rest in grace and rest in unconditional love, the real spirit of what the Bible teaches us and shows us. And really, it's funny how people will be so tied to certain beliefs and yet totally aren't connected to the real like spirit that drives those things. It's like it's more theory than theology. In my own life, the reason why I've been able to actually go through what I've gone through and be very open to people is because I stand before God And I realized that he doesn't judge me. And so if he doesn't judge me, I shouldn't judge other people. And at any time that like I do judge someone, God's like, dude, what are you doing, man? You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's like when you really grab a hold of the real thing that the real central essence of like the New Testament and stuff is that it's something that is it's an eternal message that applies itself to what I like to call moral discovery. It's ways of looking at the world and principles and formulating kind of new ideas that still at the bottom of it kind of promotes this spiritual wholeness. I've had some spiritual experiences and stuff, and I kind of want to like ease into that with the podcast because I don't want this to be like a purely religious podcast, but I want to be able to talk about spirituality in a real practical way because you know, I really feel like genuine spiritual experience is something that really like defines a person, you know, and there is genuine spiritual, there's fake, phony spirituality, fake, phony morality, and no one really buys. In fact, I mean, I've done that, and it was like the most tormenting times of my life is like trying to be good. I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, anything to contribute to any of that what I said?
I just concur.
Amen, man. Preaching the word. Yeah. No.
Well, I do think it's possible to have your podcast go both directions. I think keeping it advertised and starting off with the defectiveness thing that you were. I think that's such a powerful word that's not used often. So I think it's your moneymaker.
Yeah.
I think that you not slide in, but you do slip in, talk about like God and religion very well, and to where if you were speaking to someone, say I just was like completely atheist, to where it wouldn't, I don't think, make someone uncomfortable because you're not aggressive about it and you're very matter of fact about it. And I think that as long as you keep that in mind, you'll be totally fine. It's one of those things, again, like it's not something that you need to add, it's just something that's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for saying that, man, because it's funny because I've had to deal with mental illness. I've had to deal with like, it's like I can recognize it. It's kind of a blessing and a curse because like when you're familiar with when someone's dealing with like a neurotic, I don't know, something, you'll notice it. I've noticed spiritual people when there is something like mentally not right within their belief system. And I notice when people they may not consider themselves to be as religious, but it's like there's a mental wholeness there, and knowing the difference. Like I have a very like when I get into my story, like it adds some tension to everything because for me, like I've had some experiences that have really kind of like, they're very sobering because I think when you're given kind of a mystery and you're given something, like there's stuff that it's almost like it gives you like this, what I like to call positive tension. You know, it's like in a movie where like you're kind of like, oh man, what's going to happen? You know, and you get kind of drawn in. Well, it's like, there's this degree of, I've had enough genuine spiritual experience that I know there's something there. And I know that even if someone that, doesn't believe and doesn't have the same thing, I feel like God would rather have someone who's an authentic atheist, who's seeking answers, who's genuine, than someone who's a fake, phony religious person. To me, it's like, in fact, I like to think of sometimes people are trying to like clear, there's so much crap that we have like in our heads, just that we inherit in our culture, that like atheism is like a way of saying it's just clearing the table off and just say, okay, I just got to start fresh. And I feel like sometimes people are closer to God when they become an atheist than they were trying to follow some phony religious, structure.
I love that.
Yeah. When you were talking about being yourself, learning to be yourself, like what's really interesting about my story is that, I went to school for music. I'm a music major, for classical guitar, but I always felt that, I wanted to create, that I wanted to be a recording artist. And so when I graduated, I really put my efforts into that. I pretty much poured all of my money into recording an album, and it was a dream come true. But it was like in the process of doing that, it's like I learned so much about myself that now, like, yeah, that was the direction I thought I was going in. And then now it's like being able to like explore all the intimacies of what do I have to say and releasing a message in a certain musical form. There was so much discovery that I realized, well, I can just make videos and write books. And I don't have to spend 40 grand on it. Dude, I spent probably close to 30 to 40 grand on making my, like I went to a professional studio for like 4 years. Dude, I mean, I have a really good product, and I was really proud of it, but it was in the process of doing that. I realized that now there's this whole path now. It's like a Karate Kid who he's teaching him wax on, wax off. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and then realizes, oh, he taught me karate. It's like the process of doing something. All of a sudden, I realized I have this way of opening to people because I've explored this within myself. I can like meet people and I can explore their reality, and it's a real gift. And I feel like you have that in your own way too. And I don't know. Yeah, man. Is that kind of how you feel too? You were kind of going in one direction and you're kind of ironing yourself out. And then in the process, you have now abundance of what you can give other people because you've done work in yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And that's just going back to like holding space for yourself and figuring out what that looks like, embracing it, and also doing the work and stepping into it.
Yeah.
And I have so many different like things going on at once now all the time. And it's ultimately due to the fact that I've embraced each of those things along the way, no matter the doubt that I have about them. Being a fashion photographer, being a YouTuber, doing TikTok, doing in-person stuff, online stuff, it's a constant daily thing. And the reason I've got here, and I'm so grateful right now because I feel like I've finally figured it out, is just because I held space along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get in. Okay. So being again in the fashion industry, and kind of like we were kind of getting into that of bringing yourself to that. Tell us a little more about like some of the things that would surprise people about working with models and working with people in the industry. Like I said earlier, like I think a lot of people hold celebrities and hold people that have such outward beauty. I think we tend to project onto them, a lot of things that aren't really there.
Yeah. So, that's so easy to answer. I think that one thing I've learned, I think you've already learned this along the way, is we all have so much more in common than we think, first of all, just with everybody.
Yeah.
And second of all, like, again, if you can have genuine conversations like this with anybody, you can have genuine conversations like with celebrities and top models that I've worked with. So I treat everybody the same. I mean, like you were saying, like obviously I got nervous and things like that, but as long as you just check in and you're like, all right, why am I prepared for this? Well, because I'm me. That's enough. And so when you're in rooms like that, I think everybody just be surprised to hear that every single person is insecure about something, no matter how hot you think they are.
Yeah.
And everybody has a crazy story that they've lived. And if you understand that, hold space for everyone and take them off the pedestal, because although they're excited to be there and some of them probably eat it up, most of them are just like, hey, I'm just doing what I love and I hit the jackpot. It's nothing more complicated than that. But I think too, to add, like anytime anyone is inspired by another person or thing or place or whatever it may be, it's because they see themselves within that person. And so if you're inspired by a model or a celebrity, take it with a grain of salt and know that you see something within them that is inspired by who you really are in your nature. That doesn't mean you are them or that you're just like them by any means, and if you can't put your finger on it, maybe it's just being in the public eye, and there's nothing wrong with being inspired by being in the public eye. Maybe you do have a message to share, and when you see someone in doing that and you're inspired by that, that's a beautiful thing. Maybe it is makeup, or maybe it's all this visual stuff, or maybe it's simply just because someone's living their dream and you're jealous and you wish you could. And that's jealousy and inspiration are very near to each other, and you just have to draw the line and figure out which one is which. And when you're jealous, turn it into inspiration, because ultimately it's just a beauty of where you're at in your story.
It's weird. I've had to address jealousy and envy in ways that I'm sure that's a huge part of the entertainment industry. I mean, everyone wants the attention, everyone, and like there's times that, it's actually hilarious because the way that I've gotten into reaching out to people like yourself and stuff is that, I was upset with how people just didn't care about what I was doing. I expected people to automatically, this is kind of like, I spent all this money making an album, and I just thought, okay, it's done, success cometh, and it just wasn't happening. And like, then it hit me, it's like, what if everyone else, every other musician is also in their own way doing what I'm doing?
And they are.
And also they're feeling the same thing. Why aren't people recognizing me? And so I realized, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start writing messages to people that are the things that I need to hear. So, because I know if I need to hear it, other people need to hear it too. And man, I just spent time just reaching out to people, just saying, dude, like, and really trying to do a message where I do not ask that for a follow. It's not like, hey, you're doing great, like my page, I'll like you back. And it's kind of like, dude, I mean, it's like, okay, it's a bot. Yeah. And so like, I felt like, and I even though I had like the same cut and paste thing, I made sure I wrote their name, I'd replace it. I'd say that everyone's
intentionality there.
Yeah. And man, there was a few times, man, where people responded back. They're like, "Oh my God, I so needed to hear." Like one chick, she did like black metal or something, and like she really loved it, but she was getting like hate mail and stuff. And I don't know, I just was encouraging her to just, man, like there's only one you that exists. No one can really do what you do, exactly the same way. Like embrace that, and just kind of encouraging people to don't chase some ideal of what you think you should be, but I just encourage them to be who they are and to pour out their originality. And anyway, man, it got me kind of communicating with people, and that led to, I was like, well, there's probably other people that do other things. And so like I experimented with connecting with some other people and stuff. And man, it was just cool because I realized that man, like we assume so many things about other people, and we realize that there's so much we have similar than we have different, and like 100%. And I feel like today our differences are being so much polarized against each other, and having this awareness that like there is a common human experience. The only way that we can really promote healthy psychology is promoted. We're all connected in some way, and we have to make sure that we are influencing each other for the better, and really challenging ourselves to dig deeper into who we are as people. And it takes a village. It also takes like the individuality. There's like two dimensions. There's our individuality, but then we also need the collective. We need like to belong, and we need to have that. And I think sometimes we can get too one dimensional. We can either we're all about denying our own individuality and malnourishing ourselves inwardly, or we're about being isolated. And I mean, and for me, I mean, I've spent more time trying to like get myself together that now I'm just bursting at the seams, and I have to like reel myself in. And
I think something to add to that too is like understanding as a creator, like you are and I am, as a creator in the times that we're living in, sometimes it does feel kind of nasty to create and self-publish and like constantly just put yourself out there, and like also be the main character of the things that you're putting out, and understand that there has to be a level of compromise for your own spirituality to ultimately make a message, right? Like saying like, I'm too old for TikTok, or I am not good looking enough for this, or I'm not qualified for that. Well, you need to make some type of compromise because it's not about you.
Yeah. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff. You're awesome to talk to, man. We definitely need to do this again, because like we make a good team, I think, man. It's actually it's fun when you're able to talk to people and you are able to spur off into different tangents, and I think it's entertaining. I think we're bringing like a real humanity to the conversation, and that's ultimately I think what we're trying to do again in our individual art and our individual lives, is that we're trying to explore our own humanity, so we know how to engage with humanity itself. You know, what are some of the like biggest inspirations in your life?
I try my hardest to not really like idolize people.
Yeah.
It's scary, and also I think that I have actually met some people that I idolize, and it takes a lot of that like mystery away. The last question, understanding that we're all kind of have so much in common, so it's really difficult for me to point out certain people. I think I'm just so inspired by how I feel about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I constantly check back in with that all the time. Like, how does your heart feel about this? Morally, how are we feeling? Physically, how are we feeling? Like, I'm constantly checking that. I just have such a spark about what I do and like what gets me out of bed in the morning, especially because I've worked for myself. Like, I've had my own schedule. In that discipline is that check-in of like, all right, what can we do today? How do we best manage this day, this schedule? Or it's a rough day, like how do we hold space for that and also still get things done or maybe not get things done? So I'm really inspired by my own energy towards the things that I feel called to do over and over and over again. And I also think I'm really inspired by how people respond to it. I think in person, I've seen so much like change made because I said something, or I've had multiple times people come up to me years later. I was in Colorado 2 months ago shooting one of my good friends, and I'd known him for 5 years. First, most of our relationship was just like partying, running into each other. He was a bartender. And before I moved, I made a list of people that I wanted to have dinner, drinks, lunch, whatever with before I left. Like this guy, him and I had never had like a meaningful conversation, which you obviously know drove me crazy, but our energies always matched. And so we went and had drinks and food right before I moved and had this deep conversation. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you are meant for so much more. Stop with the drugs, stop with the alcohol. Like, why are you working with these people? Because he's also an entrepreneur. And it was just kind of like checking him because he was wrecking himself. And I could see in his eyes that he was just like, damn, she's right. Like, I really needed to hear this. So anyways, I was just like, honestly, take it for what it is. No matter, regardless, I still just love spending time with you. And so it's just a fun time. Fast forward 2 years, he finally hires me to shoot him. We're doing headshots because he is launching his own CBD company and just crushing it. And we're at dinner after the shoot, which is like, I'm friends with everybody I work with. We go to dinner together with some mutual friends. And he was like, Rebecca, you changed my life. And I was like, what? And he was like, what you said to me about what the type of energy I put out and like is the same type of energy I will receive back. He was like, I've never been the same since that conversation. It was one of the most pivotal moments of my life. But I was like, you were in a space to hear me, so don't give me all the credit. But so there's been a lot of that along my journey where someone's like, hey, you did this and it changed my perspective, or hey, you did this and this is the ultimate effect it had. That's really, really inspiring to me to keep going. Just recalling that story right now, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I've had a few similar moments with that, and I know what you mean, because it feels like the soil is right to what you say is it's what they needed, but their heart's open to it. So it's like it's not that you can take all the credit or I can take all whatever. We're just being ourselves. Right. And that person is just happens to be in that situation where it's like, I mean, I really think those are like synchronicities that we have in our life that really indicate that we're on the right track. That like those are things that ultimately, like when you look back upon, that's what makes your life so meaningful is that you're able to connect and give of yourself, and you never know when that's going to happen. And it's trying to be present around people to notice like when there's an opportunity. And sometimes you start and you realize, oh, this isn't one of those times for me to philosophize and to give what I have, but
and you have to look for like the small wins along the way of you doing what you're supposed to be doing. For you, it's like interviewing people, and maybe you get this one interview that like was a game changer and you're like, that's a small win. You hit a certain amount of subscribers, or I get a comment like that, and it's just like, you need to take those small wins for what they are. And every friend in my life will tell you, on my dying grave, no one celebrated Rebecca Slaughter more than Rebecca Slaughter. And I'll be damned if that's ever different. No one should be celebrating me more than me. Absolutely. And when I get small wins, it's my job to announce them, and it's my job to appreciate them. Like, I will literally be at the most random dinner or lunch and order a round of alcohol, and just like, because that's like a good and easy way to celebrate with friends. and they're like, what is this for? And I'm like, I booked a gig in New York today. Fucking cool.
Yeah.
They'd be like, cool, right on, but had I not done that, they'd just been like, cool, of course she got a gig in New York, it's her. But like, I don't think like that.
Yeah.
So you have to really recognize the small wins, and it's on you to celebrate and invite other people to celebrate you in the most possible way.
Dude, absolutely. That's so good, because if you're waiting to celebrate the big things, you got to have momentum in order to accomplish the big things. Sometimes, man, it's effort for me to just say, I'm gonna go exercise, and dude, I don't feel like it at all. In fact, it's like, and yet I push through that and I do it, or let's say I just walk or go for a jog, just something. And part of me is like, you didn't do enough, and that's a problem with OCD and whatever. So there's always there's that feeling that you've never done enough. Like I could be almost passed out at the gym, and it's like, okay, I took myself to my limit. It's like, well, I can't do that every day. Like, it's probably not healthy to put myself.
Here's a term for you, especially a Christian term: radical self-acceptance towards what you're choosing to do. So when you decide you were finished working out, you need to have radical self-acceptance towards that thing, which radical implies grace, like this ridiculous, like it's okay.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I go through that, and I went through that, I feel like, in 2020 a lot too. It's just like, how do I like radically accept the fact that like I can't work right now? I can't. It's like feels impossible to accept something like that. But when you do it so radically, it's almost easier to like wrap your head around it.
There was that book, I think, I'm not sure, you may have posted about it, I'm not sure, but there's a book, something about it's like love yourself as if your life depended on it. And there's like I think he's got like a gun to his head,
Oh, that sounds really interesting though.
Yeah, like just the idea of it. Like I think some of the reviews were kind of mixed on it, but like I think I downloaded the Kindle, and it was really good. And because I understood the concept. It's kind of like you have to be that extreme about it, because it's almost like loving yourself to the point where it's uncomfortable. Because I think if you love yourself and it's there's areas where we don't accept ourselves. The sticking points that come up and they catch us by surprise. And I feel like someone who really knows themselves, and like when things go wrong, they don't go wrong, that they stay in the moment. It's like there's this pathway of order that they've already like been comfortable with. When things happen, they know what to do. And it's almost like jazz. It's almost like when things go wrong, they know how to take it and just roll with it. When there's a wrong note, you just it's like it's like life's like jazz. There's like you when things happen, you run with it. You
read Blue Like Jazz?
Yes, I have. Great book.
Like you said in the beginning, you said when everything goes wrong, you have to go right. And that's kind of what you're saying. And I think to wrap this all up, like unconditional love we talked about in the beginning. Can you unconditionally love yourself? And that's really what's it about. What it's about, because if you can unconditionally love I can't even say that word. If you can unconditionally love yourself, and you can accept so many things about yourself, other people will too, and that will make your whole life less miserable. And the thing is, like, sometimes we think and we expect other people to love on us or accept things about us that we can't love or accept ourselves, and that is so ass backwards.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's and I think a proper relationship between two people too, like when we bring all this to our relationships, our expectations, and if we're trying to find that sort of fulfillment in somebody else, I think too often relationships happen to where there's that mutual kind of codependence or whatever, and it's kind of like they both need each other. And it's like, I'm still trying to grow in this, because I'm still like, having really explored myself, I'm still getting used to like having like knowing what's the proper relationship between two people. How do you avoid
Are you in a relationship?
No, not right now.
You can only do so much relationship practice while you're not in one. Like it just doesn't matter. Like you can do as much work as you want, but until you're with someone, then you have to deal with the things as they come up.
Yeah, that's very true.